Trump's tariff threats, a bold move to safeguard the dollar's reign during the midpoint of his presidency. Donald Trump took a dramatic step to protect the U.S. dollar's status as the world's leading currency. He announced a sweeping policy. Any nation within the BRICS coalition, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, that dared to develop or back a currency challenging the dollar's dominance would face an immediate and punishing 100% tariff on all their trade with the United States. This wasn't a casual suggestion. It was a firm ultimatum, one Trump framed as a non-negotiable boundary in the realm of global economics. He didn't stop there either. These countries would also be permanently locked out of the American market, a move designed to hit their economies hard and send a clear message. The U.S. would not tolerate threats to its financial supremacy. Trump dubbed this policy an economic red line, a phrase that carried weight beyond mere rhetoric. To him, the U.S. dollar wasn't just a tool for buying and selling, it was a cornerstone of America's influence, a symbol of power built over decades of economic leadership. He saw any attempt to undermine it as an attack not just on the currency, but on the United States itself. This wasn't a one-off statement buried in a speech either. Trump doubled down, taking to social media platforms to repeat his warning, hammering home his resolve. His posts were unambiguous. The dollar's dominance was non-negotiable, and he'd use every lever of American power to defend it. The context here matters. The BRICS nations had been making noises about reducing their reliance on the dollar for years, exploring alternatives that could shift the balance of global trade. Trump's tariff threat was a preemptive strike, a way to stop that momentum before it could fully take root. He wasn't subtle about his intentions. His administration made it clear that this was about preserving a system where the U.S. held the upper hand. The dollar's role in international transactions, from oil deals to debt payments, gave America leverage over other nations, and Trump wasn't about to let that slip away without a fight. This move wasn't without risks, though. By drawing such a hard line, Trump put the U.S. on a collision course with some of the world's fastest-growing economies. The BRICS bloc wasn't just a minor player, they represented a massive chunk of global population and resources. Threatening them with tariffs and market bans could easily backfire, pushing them to accelerate their efforts to dethrone the dollar rather than back down. Trump's gamble was that the economic pain would force compliance, but it also raised the stakes in an already tense global financial landscape. His stance was bold, unapologetic, and quintessentially Trump. Whether it would succeed, however, was another question entirely. BRICS' response: a defiant push against the dollar's grip. When Donald Trump threw down the gauntlet with his 100% tariff threat, the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, didn't flinch. Instead, they hit back with a coordinated and audacious counterattack, signaling they weren't about to let the U.S. dictate the terms of global finance. Leading the charge was Brazil, which held the rotating BRICS chairmanship in 2024. Far from cowering under Trump's warnings, Brazil brushed them off and rolled out ambitious plans to reshape how it handles money on the world stage. They took their domestic digital payment system, Pix, already a hit with over 150 million users, and started adapting it for international use. At the same time, they launched SML, a new cross-border payment network using the Brazilian real, completely sidestepping the US dollar. Early deals with Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay showed it could work, even if the speeds were still modest. Brazil's goal? A fast, efficient system that doesn't need Washington's currency to function. But Brazil wasn't just tinkering locally, this was a deliberate jab at the dollar's central role in global trade, and they weren't alone. The BRICS bloc as a whole stepped up with even bigger moves. They're working on BRICS Pay, a decentralized blockchain-powered platform that lets member countries trade directly, cutting out SWIFT, the US-dominated system that's long been the dollar's backbone. Alongside that, they're crafting a new reserve currency to rival the dollar in cross-border deals. Perhaps their boldest play, though, is the gold rush. In just 2 years, BRICS countries quietly scooped up over 600 tons of gold. This wasn't about flaunting wealth. It was a strategic buffer, a way to shield themselves from dollar-driven financial pressure and build a foundation for a world where the U.S. currency isn't king. The message was clear: BRICS wasn't just reacting, they were reimagining the global financial order. Brazil's SML and PIX expansions were the opening salvo, testing the waters for a dollar-free future. BRICS Pay and the Reserve Currency Project took it further, aiming to dismantle the systems that keep the dollar on top. The gold stockpile added muscle, a tangible asset to back their ambitions. Trump's tariff threat was meant to intimidate, but instead, it lit a fire under BRICS, pushing them to accelerate plans that had been simmering for years. This wasn't a knee-jerk retaliation. It was a calculated, collective pivot toward independence, one that could shake the foundations of America's economic dominance if it gains traction. Global shift away from dollar. A quiet revolution gains momentum. Donald Trump's tariff threats didn't just rile up the BRICS nations. They sparked a broader, quieter rebellion against the US dollar's long-held dominance. Hence, countries within and beyond the BRICS bloc started taking concrete steps to loosen the dollar's grip on their economies, forging new paths that bypassed America's financial system entirely. Take China and Brazil, for instance. They struck deals to settle their trade in Yuan and Real, ditching the dollar as the middleman. Russia and Iran went a step further, linking their banking systems to handle transactions without SWIFT, the US-controlled network that's been a linchpin of dollar power. Meanwhile, India and Russia began trading oil, a commodity long tethered to the dollar, in rupees and rubles. South Africa, too, leaned harder into the Chinese yuan for its dealings with Beijing, signaling a willingness to diversify away from Washington's currency. This wasn't just a handful of isolated moves. It was a pattern, a growing wave of defiance. The real turning point came when BRICS expanded its ranks, welcoming heavyweights like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Indonesia, and Egypt. This wasn't a minor club anymore. It was a coalition of rising powers with the clout to challenge the status quo. Together, they're pushing for a multipolar financial world where the dollar isn't the automatic go-to. It's just one option among many. For decades, the US leveraged the dollar's role in everything from oil sales to international loans to keep other nations in line. Now that leverage is under siege as these countries build systems that don't need America's permission to function. The shift has roots in frustration. America's habit of wielding sanctions and tariffs as weapons didn't just annoy its rivals. It alienated allies and trading partners too. EU. The BRICS expansion was a loud statement. These nations are done playing by Washington's rules. They're not outright declaring war on the dollar yet, but they're laying the groundwork for a future where it's not essential. China's yuan, Russia's rubles, Brazil's real, these aren't replacing the dollar overnight, but they're chipping away at its monopoly deal by deal. The implications are huge. If the dollar loses its default status, the US could see its economic influence shrink, its ability to dictate terms weakened. Ability to dictate terms weakened. This quiet revolution isn't flashy, but it's relentless, and it's forcing the world to rethink a financial order that's been taken for granted for generations. US economic backlash. Trump's tariffs boomerang on America. Donald Trump's bold tariff gambit was meant to strong-arm the BRICS nations into submission, but instead, it unleashed a storm that battered the US economy almost immediately. Within a mere 24 hours of his announcement of a 100% tariff on BRICS countries daring to challenge the dollar, the financial markets recoiled. The Nasdaq plummeted by 2%, a sharp signal of investor panic, while the S&P 500 shed over 1%, not a catastrophic drop, but enough to rattle confidence. Worse still, the Atlanta Fed's GDP Now model painted a grim picture, forecasting a 1.8% growth rate for the first quarter of 2025. That's not just a slowdown, it's a red flag for stagflation, a toxic mix of stagnant growth and rising prices that could choke the economy for months, if not years. The fallout didn't stop at Wall Street. America's allies, spooked by Trump's aggressive stance, began dumping US Treasuries at an alarming rate, $390 billion worth to be exact. These bonds are the bedrock of the dollar's global trust, and their mass sell-off by friendly nations was a stinging rebuke. It wasn't just a financial move, it was a vote of no confidence in Trump's strategy. Investors started asking hard questions. Has the US turned the dollar into a political battering ram? If the world stops seeing it as a reliable store of value and starts viewing it as a weapon, who pays the price? The answer, increasingly, looks like America itself. If trust in the dollar erodes, it's not the BRICS bloc that'll feel the worst of it. It's the US, which relies on that trust to fund its debts and keep its economy humming. Trump's tariffs were supposed to flex American muscle, but they exposed vulnerabilities instead. The market dips hinted at deeper trouble, businesses braced for higher costs, consumers faced pricier goods, and the GDP forecast suggested a slowdown that could hit jobs and wages. Treasury sell-off only amplified the chaos, raising borrowing costs at a time when stability was sorely needed. Far from cowing his targets, Trump's move handed BRICS a golden opportunity to point at the US and say, "This is why we need alternatives." The economic backlash wasn't just a hiccup, it was a warning shot that America's financial dominance might be more fragile than it seems. Trump bet big on intimidation, but the early returns suggest he might have miscalculated, leaving the US to grapple with the mess he stirred up. Tesla and US-EU-Canada tensions. A transatlantic rift widens. Donald Trump's tariff threats didn't just rattle the BRICS nations, they strained ties with long-standing allies, dragging Tesla into the fray and exposing cracks in America's economic relationships with Europe and Canada. Tesla, once a shining symbol of US innovation, took a brutal hit in Europe, particularly in Norway, one of the world's most advanced electric vehicle markets. In 2024, its market share there cratered from 21.7% to 7.4% in a single year, a stunning 14% drop. The slide wasn't just about competition, it was personal. Elon Musk's vocal support for far-right parties like Germany's AfD and the UK's Reform Party, plus his polarizing remarks on European politics, turned consumers and investors sour. In Denmark, the academic pension fund dumped all its Tesla stock, 400 million kroner, after the company snubbed union labor agreements in Sweden, sparking strikes that crippled Tesla's operations across service centers and transport hubs. Transport. Public opinion followed suit. In Norway, positive views of Tesla fell from 19% to 11%, while negative sentiments spiked from 47% to 63%. Meanwhile, Trump was stoking his own fires with Europe. During a meeting with NATO Secretary General, he blasted the EU's trade policies, gripping that they blocked US agricultural goods and cars while flooding America with BMW and Mercedes-Benzes. Trade between the US and EU tops $1. $2 trillion a year, but Trump saw it as lopsided, accusing Europe of unfair tax breaks, like those given to Apple, and vowing more tariffs. The EU didn't sit idly by. Leaders warned of a strong response to America's protectionism, eyeing retaliatory tariffs on goods from pro-Trump states. Canada, too, felt the heat, with Trump slapping tariffs on its steel, aluminum, and lumber. In a surprising pivot, Canada started sourcing military gear, like Sweden's Saab Gripen jets, from Europe instead of the US, deepening ties via the EU-Canada trade deal, CETA, which has boosted bilateral trade by 60% since 2017. Tesla's woes and these transatlantic tensions aren't separate stories. They're symptoms of a bigger shift. Europe and Canada are forging a new economic and defense alliance, partly to counter Trump's unpredictable policies. Tesla's losing ground to local brands like Volkswagen and China's BYD, while the US risks alienating allies it once took for granted. Trump's tariff tantrums aim to assert dominance, but they're driving a wedge that could reshape global alliances and leave American icons like Tesla caught in the crossfire. Domestic US impact. Trump's policies turn on his own base. Donald Trump's aggressive tariff strategy was sold as a way to make America great again, but it's unraveling into a domestic nightmare, and the hardest hit are the very people who cheered him on. The US economy is reeling, with stock markets tumbling and cryptocurrencies crashing, wiping out millions of jobs in a cascade of chaos. Rural communities, Trump's loyal heartland, once saw him as their champion, but now they're bearing the brunt of his policies. Farmers, veterans, and small-town families who banked on his promises are watching their livelihoods vanish. Jobs are drying up, healthcare benefits are getting slashed, and bankruptcies are piling up, turning hope into hardship. These aren't just numbers. They're stories of people who can't pay bills, whose living conditions are crumbling in ways they never imagined. The unrest is palpable. Across the country, Trump's once steadfast supporters are breaking their silence. Community meetings and protests are popping up in state after state, with rallies demanding action to stop the economic freefall. They're not just asking for help. They're insisting on real change, policies that protect their jobs and families and restore trust in a government they feel has betrayed them. The frustration is boiling over, and the clock is ticking. If the administration doesn't pivot fast, analysts warn this could spiral into a crisis too deep to fix. The rural states that painted the electoral map red for Trump are now ground zero for unemployment and despair, a bitter irony for a leader who vowed to put them first. This isn't a fringe problem, it's a nationwide wound. The stock market crashes signal broader instability, hitting both big corporations and small businesses with rising costs and supply chain snarls. But it's the rural backbone farmers who can't sell crops, workers laid off from shuttered plants, that's suffering most. These are the same folks who waved MAGA flags, now waving signs of protest instead. Trump's tariffs, meant to strong-arm foreign rivals, have ricocheted back home, shattering the stability he promised to build. His base isn't just disappointed, they're furious, and their demands are growing louder. The question looms, can America pull itself together, or will this economic mess fracture the nation beyond repair? For now, the people who trusted Trump most are paying the steepest price, and they're not staying quiet about it anymore. Canada's trade war. A northern standoff with Donald Trump's tariff barrage didn't spare Canada, igniting one of the country's fiercest trade battles in years and testing its resolve like never before. On April 2, 2025, Trump slapped steep tariffs on Canadian imports, 25% on steel, 10% on aluminum, and new levies on lumber, which makes up 34% of U.S. imports and the $85 billion auto industry. His stated goal? Protect American interests. But the move felt more like a power play, and Canada's new Liberal leader, Mark Carney, wasn't about to let it slide. Fresh off his March 3rd victory over Justin Trudeau to head the party, Carney, a financial heavyweight who steered the Bank of Canada through the 2008 crisis and later led the Bank of England, found himself in a showdown with Trump on day one. Day one. We're not looking for a fight, but Canada won't back down, he declared, framing it as a stand for national sovereignty, not just economics. Carney's response was swift and sharp. He pledged retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, dairy, eggs, beef, smartphones, laptops, hitting back at American consumers and businesses. We won't bow down, he insisted, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Canadian exporters face billions in losses, with experts warning of up to 100,000 manufacturing jobs at risk if the trade war drags on. Prices for everyday goods are already climbing on both sides of the border, squeezing families and fueling tension. Trump tried to spin the tariffs as a drug crackdown, claiming they'd pressure Canada to curb fentanyl flows, but the numbers don't add up. U.S. Customs seized just 43 pounds at the Canadian border last year, a tiny fraction compared to Mexico's flood. Critics call it a flimsy excuse, a distraction from the real motive, economic arm twisting. This clash isn't just about trade, it's a defining moment for Canada. Carney, untested as a politician but seasoned in high-stakes finance, is betting on resilience. The Conservative opposition, led by Pierre Poilievre, smells blood, accusing him of weakness and cozying up to Trump's agenda. With an election looming, it's a brutal test. Will Canadians rally behind Carney's defiance or Poilievre's hardline stance? Beyond the politics, the economic fallout looms large: lost jobs, higher costs, disrupted supply chains. Trump's tariffs aim to bend Canada to his will, but they've sparked a northern defiance that's reshaping its future. This isn't just a trade spat, it's a fight for Canada's pride and place in the world, and Carney's holding the line, for now. For China's retaliation, striking back at Trump's tariff gambit when Donald Trump unleashed his latest round of tariffs, China didn't blink. It swung back with precision, targeting America's economic soft spots and signaling a fight that could ripple across the globe. First in the crosshairs, U.S. agriculture. China slapped heavy tariffs on soybeans, corn, chicken, and other farm goods, exports worth nearly $22 billion in 2024 alone. For Midwestern farmers, Trump's heartland base, this is a gut punch. Soybeans, a lifeline for many, could push growers into bankruptcy if China's doors stay shut. The pain won't stop at the fields. Higher costs will snake through supply chains, jacking up prices for consumers and threatening a spiral that dents America's economic edge. Trump pitched his tariffs as a fix for trade imbalances, but China's counterstrike shows how fast this can boomerang. Agriculture is just the opening act. China's eyeing bigger game. High-tech industries and rare earth minerals, the lifeblood of semiconductors, smartphones, and military gear. By threatening to choke off these exports, China's playing hardball. Disruptions here could kneecap U.S. tech giants and defense contractors, forcing them to scramble for costly alternatives. Production delays and price hikes would hit everything from iPhones to fighter jets, eroding America's lead in the global tech race. Trump's team insists these tariffs will force China to heal, but the U.S. economy's already feeling the heat. Markets brace for inflation as goods get pricier, small businesses buckle under supply chain chaos, and unemployment looms if this escalates. Purchasing power could shrink, stalling any hope of a quick recovery. China's strategy isn't impulsive, it's calculated. Rare earths are their ace, a resource the U.S. can't easily replace. If they tighten the tap, American innovation takes a hit, and the defense sector, reliant on these minerals, faces a slow bleed. Trump's doubling down, betting China will blink first, but the stakes are sky high. Consumers might soon pay more for phones and cars, while companies struggle to keep costs down. This isn't just a trade tiff, it's a test of economic resilience. China's blows could weaken America's competitiveness, leaving it lagging behind rivals who sidestep the chaos. Slates. Trump wanted to flex U.S. muscle, but China's retaliation is a stark reminder. In this game, the U.S. isn't untouchable, and the fallout could reshape markets and lives for years.